I attended my best friend's mother's funeral, only to see my wife there. She was supposed to be on a business trip halfway across the world. Instead, she was standing by his side, thanking the guests as if she were his wife. When she saw me, panic flashed across her face. She pulled me aside and whispered, "Caleb's mother always wanted to see him settled down before she passed. I'm just helping him fulfill her final wish. Don't overthink it." Even my so-called best friend put a hand on my shoulder. "I'm just borrowing my sister-in-law for a favor, Ben. Besides, respect the dead. You wouldn't be that petty, would you?" I sneered and brushed his hand off, shoving my wife into his arms. "Of course I don't mind. Why don't you celebrate a wedding and a funeral on the same day? It's a 2-for-1 deal." The room fell into a heavy silence. The guests, unaware of the truth, began to whisper and stare at us. Lydia glared at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Bennett, do you even hear yourself? This is Caleb's mother's funeral. You're being incredibly disrespectful." Disrespectful? Me. I almost laughed out loud at the irony. 2 days ago, she told me her company was sending her out of state for a week. I was the one who packed her suitcase. If I hadn't come to pay my respects today, I never would have known. Her business trip was actually a role play as the lady of my best friend's house. No wonder she wouldn't let me drive her to the airport. This was a calculated lie from start to finish. How did she have the nerve to lecture me on manners? Lydia seemed to realize she was in the wrong when I didn't back down. She reached out and grabbed my arm. "Bennett, please stop this. We can talk when we get home. We're just doing him a favor. It doesn't hurt anyone." Right, it doesn't hurt. Even if they slept in the same bed tonight, it wouldn't physically hurt me, right? I ripped my arm away from her. My heart felt like it had been dropped into a bucket of ice. I stared into her pleading eyes and asked one last time, "Are you coming home with me right now or not?" Lydia didn't even hesitate. She shook her head. "The service just started. I can't just walk out on him." I nodded. "Fine. If that was her choice, then we were done. I'll have the divorce papers sent to you as soon as possible. I hope you two are very happy together." I turned to leave, but Caleb chased after me. He was dressed in a sharp black suit, his eyes red from crying. He looked at me with a face full of sorrow. "I'm so sorry, Ben. I know I didn't think this through. It was an emergency, and I didn't have time to ask you. Please don't hold it against her. If you're going to be mad at me. Lydia has nothing to do with this." Lydia frowned and muttered under her breath, "Why are you even explaining things to him? Do you think he'll listen? You're probably the only man in the world who would get jealous of his own best friend." She grabbed Caleb's arm and tried to pull him back inside. "Forget about him. Let's go back in." Watching them play the part of the grieving couple made me want to applaud. So I was the villain now? I was the one being unreasonable? My eyes locked onto her hand on his arm. Suddenly, a lot of memories started to click into place. I hated seafood, but Caleb loved it. Lydia's signature dish was seafood paella. She used to tell me not to let food go to waste, so she'd insist I invite Caleb over for dinner. I was stupid enough to think she was just being a good host. I was the fool who invited the wolf into my own home. Or the times I went away for work. Caleb would always offer to look after Lydia for me. He'd say, "A brother's wife is family. I'll make sure she's taken care of." I wonder if he ever saw her as just family. They were perfect for each other. I was just the third wheel standing in their way. Caleb patted Lydia's hand and stepped toward me again. He gave me a deep, dramatic bow. "Ben, I'm truly sorry. If this makes you uncomfortable, I'll go inside and tell everyone the truth right now. Even if my mother can't rest in peace, I won't betray our friendship." The words sounded noble, but I didn't see a shred of real guilt in his eyes. "Fine. Go ahead," I said. Empty promises are easy to make. I wanted to see if he actually had the guts to tell his entire family he was a liar. Caleb's face stiffened. He hadn't expected me to call his bluff. I mean, he stammered, unable to finish. Just then Caleb's Aunt Martha walked over. "Caleb, Lydia, what are you doing out here? Who is this young man?" The yard went quiet. Everyone was watching us. Lydia spoke up before I could. "Just a friend, Auntie. He came to pay his respects to the family." "A friend?" I wanted to laugh. Lydia really had wiped me out of her life entirely. Aunt Martha nodded, believing every word. She even invited me to stay for the funeral lunch. I didn't say a word. Lydia was the one who jumped in to decline for me. "He's a very busy man. He has a big meeting at the office. I don't think he can stay." I went along with it and nodded. She's right. I'm very busy, but I can always make time for important things. Like your wedding, for instance. Make sure to send me an invite, so I can bring a big gift. Lydia's face turned pale. She looked like she wanted to scream at me, but she couldn't with her relatives standing there. Aunt Martha just smiled warmly, completely oblivious. Caleb and Lydia really are a match made in heaven. We're all so happy for them. It's just a shame about the mourning period. Caleb should really wait a while before the wedding. I didn't stick around for the rest of her speech. I turned and walked to my car. As I pulled away, I saw Lydia start to follow me, but Caleb caught her arm. Lydia, come back and help me light the incense for Mom. She'd want you there. In my rearview mirror, I saw her stop. She didn't hesitate for long before she followed him back into the funeral home. My heart had turned into a block of lead. I realized that the moment I hoped for an apology, I had already lost. When I got home, I barely had my shoes off before my cat, Honey, came over to rub against my legs. Honey was a stray Lydia and I had rescued when we first started dating. She had followed us for 3 blocks. Lydia said it was a sign of good luck, so we took her in. I sighed and picked the cat up. My relationship with Lydia was a disaster, but Honey was still the same sweet girl. As if she could feel my sadness, she purred and kneaded her paws against my chest. The weight on my heart lifted just a little bit. Hungry girl, I whispered, scratching her behind the ears. I was about to go to the kitchen to feed her when the front door opened. Lydia was back. When she saw me sitting on the couch with Honey, her face twisted in annoyance. Ugh, why is that cat on the sofa? I just bought those covers. What if she claws them? She marched over and grabbed Honey by the scruff of her neck, tossing her onto the floor. The cat hit the hardwood with a dull thud. I jumped up, worried she was hurt. That's when I noticed Caleb walking in behind her. Hey, Ben. I was just dropping Lydia off. I figured you probably hadn't eaten, so I brought some takeout. He walked to the dining table and started unpacking bags like he owned the place. The familiarity of it made my blood boil. I watched Caleb's movements with cold eyes. I picked Honey up again and held her tight. Aren't you supposed to be in mourning? Isn't it disrespectful to barge into someone else's house during a funeral week? You have a house full of relatives to take care of. Yet you're so worried about another man's wife. Caleb's face darkened at my words. Lydia was the one who exploded. She stomped over and glared at me. Bennett Harris, I have been way too patient with you today. What is your problem? He's being a nice guy, bringing you food and making sure I got home safe. Why are you being so jealous? Stop acting like a king. Get over here and eat. I looked at the greasy containers on the table. It was seafood fried rice. Caleb stood there, watching the drama with a smug look. Lydia made this herself. Not everyone gets to taste her cooking. Stop being mad and eat, Ben. Suddenly, Caleb let out a loud sneeze and backed away. I almost forgot. I'm allergic to cats. Lydia immediately looked at him with concern, asking if he was okay, or if he needed to go to the ER. Honey shivered in my arms, spooked by the shouting. I let out a harsh laugh. I'm deathly allergic to shellfish. If I eat that, I'll end up in the hospital. Do you really not know that, or are you just hoping I'll die so you can marry him? Lydia's eyes turned red with rage. She lunged at me as if to slap me. Bennett, shut up. Just shut up. Caleb stepped in to play the peacemaker. Don't fight because of me. I shouldn't have come. I was out of line at the funeral too. I don't want this to ruin our friendship, Ben. I didn't answer. Lydia suddenly reached out, snatched Honey from my arms, and threw her across the room. The cat let out a sharp, pained yelp. Lydia didn't stop. She walked over and kicked the poor animal. Honey's head slammed against the coffee table, and she went limp. Lydia, what the hell is wrong with you? I hadn't expected her to snap like that. I shoved her aside and ran to the cat. I knelt down and gently scooped Honey up. She was still breathing, but her eyes were glazed over. Lydia showed no remorse. She stood there with her arms crossed. I told you we should never have kept that stray. They're impossible to train. Impossible to train? It wasn't the cat that was the problem. People are much more vicious than animals could ever be. I stood up with Honey in my arms and looked Lydia in the eye. She flinched at the look on my face, but her voice stayed sharp. I'm right. That cat probably has diseases anyway. That cat is none of your business anymore, I said. I walked out the door and drove straight to the 24-hour vet. Thankfully, after an exam, the vet said she was mostly just in shock. No permanent damage. I didn't want to bring her back to that house, so I left her at the vet's clinic for observation. I drove back home alone, but as I reached for the door handle, I heard a sound that made me freeze. It was a soft, rhythmic moaning coming from inside. I couldn't believe my ears. I thought they might be bold, but I never imagined they'd do this in my own home. Especially not today. Not while Caleb's mother was barely cold in the ground. I pushed the door open. There they were. On my sofa. Lydia's clothes were a mess, and Caleb was pinned on top of her. Her eyes were glazed with lust. Something inside me finally snapped. They actually did it. They both jumped when they heard the door. Lydia looked at me stunned. She pushed Caleb off and scrambled to fix her shirt. She was trembling so hard she couldn't even button it right. Caleb was quiet. He stood up and looked at the floor, refusing to meet my eyes. Bennett, why are you back? I thought you were staying at the vet's. I looked at her, my face a mask of stone. I'm not allowed back in my own house? She fidgeted with her hair. I didn't mean it like that. The room was suffocating. Caleb took a step toward me, trying to explain. Ben, it's not what it looks like. Lydia and I were just. Before he could finish, Lydia pointed a finger at him and shrieked. It was him. He did this. He slipped something in my drink. I didn't want this to happen, I swear. She tried to run into my arms, sobbing. Bennett, thank God you're home. I don't know what he would have done to me. I didn't catch her. I stepped back and watched her stumble. Slipped something in her drink? Thank God I'm home? Did she really think I was that stupid? Did she think I'd just believe whatever lie she spit out? Lydia looked at me with wide, innocent eyes, looking betrayed that I didn't hold her. Bennett, you don't believe me? I'm the victim here. I would never cheat on you. Especially not with your best friend. Caleb's face went pale. He looked hurt, but he didn't argue. He actually let her blame him. I was almost impressed by his commitment to her. Lydia tried to grab my hand, but I pulled away. Lydia, listen to yourself. Do you actually think that's believable? I have eyes. I trust what I saw. She started to open her mouth again, but I didn't give her the chance. I took the divorce papers I had printed earlier and threw them at her. Sign them. I'm done. I'm out. The divorce papers fluttered down onto the coffee table, landing right beside Caleb's discarded suit jacket. Lydia stared at the thick stack of paper, her face draining of what little color remained. She looked at the bold heading at the top of the first page. Decree of dissolution of marriage. Bennett, you're being insane, she gasped, her voice shrill with rising panic. You think you can just throw papers at me and throw away 3 years of marriage over a misunderstanding? A misunderstanding? I echoed. My voice was eerily quiet, colder than the winter air outside. I caught you on our sofa, with your clothes ripped open, beneath my best friend, on the same day his mother's body was placed in the ground. Which part of that is a misunderstanding, Lydia? Caleb finally found his voice. He stepped in front of Lydia, pulling his shirt together, putting on that familiar, pathetic martyr look he had perfected over a lifetime. Ben, listen to me, Caleb said, his hands raised in surrender. I know how this looks. I know you're furious. But if you walk away now, you're going to regret. Lydia loves you. She was just overwhelmed by grief and stress from my mom's passing. Shut your mouth, Caleb. I cut him off cleanly. Every time you open it, another lie spills out. You used your own mother's corpse as a prop to play house with my wife. You don't get to talk about grief. Caleb flinched, his jaw tightening. Lydia snatched the papers off the table and crumpled them in her fist. I'm not signing these. You can't divorce me. You have no proof of anything. It's my word against his. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket and tapped the screen twice. A crisp, high-definition audio recording began to play from the phone's speaker. Bennett, why are you back? I thought you were staying at the vet's. It was him. He did this. He slipped something in my drink. I didn't want this to happen, I swear. Lydia's own panicked, hysterical voice echoed through the silent living room, followed by the clear visual snapshot I had taken the second I pushed the front door open. The indoor nanny camera mounted on the bookshelf, its tiny green recording light blinking steadily. Lydia's mouth stayed open, but no sound came out. The cloud backup updates every 10 seconds, I said, locking the phone and slipping it back into my coat. I have the footage of you kicking Honey. I have the footage of you throwing seafood paella at me knowing my severe allergy. And I have 45 minutes of 4K footage of what you two were doing on that sofa before I unlocked the door. Caleb's face went completely gray. Ben, you had a camera in here? I put it up last month when we started talking about having a baby, I said, looking at Lydia. I wanted to make sure our home was safe. Turns out, though, danger was already living inside it. Lydia dropped the crumpled papers. Tears overflowed her eyes, spilling down her pale cheeks, but this time, there was no anger in her expression, only sheer, terrifying panic. Bennett, please, she whimpered, taking a step toward me, reaching out her trembling hands. Don't do this. I was stupid. I was confused. Caleb kept coming around. He kept telling me how much he needed me. I lost my head. Please, Bennett, we can go to counseling. I'll do anything. I stepped back, avoiding her touch as if she carried a plague. I'm giving you 24 hours to pack your clothes and get out of my house, I said smoothly. The apartment was bought under my name before our marriage. The deed is entirely mine. If you aren't gone by 8 a.m. tomorrow, the police will escort you out for trespassing. I turned toward the hallway, grabbed my suitcase, and packed my essentials, my passport, my work laptop, my financial documents, and a few suits. When I walked back out into the living room, Lydia was on her knees beside the sofa, weeping hysterically, while Caleb stood beside her, staring at the floor in utter defeat. Enjoy the sofa, I said without looking back. It's all yours. I walked out the door and slammed it shut behind me. I spent the night at a high-end service apartment 2 blocks from my office. The room was clean, quiet, and completely free of the suffocating scent of seafood and cheap cologne. For the first time in years, I slept 6 uninterrupted hours. At 7 a.m., my phone buzzed with a call from Dr. Evans at the emergency vet clinic. Mr. Harris? Good news. Honey is awake, eating wet food, and her vitals are completely stable. You can come pick her up this afternoon. A genuine, warm wave of relief washed over my chest. Thank you, Dr. Evans. I'll be there at 2. After hanging up, I called Marcus Vance, the top forensic divorce attorney in the city and a senior partner at my uncle's firm. An hour later, I was sitting in Marcus's sunlit office on the top floor of the Financial District Tower, drinking black coffee while he reviewed my digital evidence file. Marcus flipped through the bank statements I had pulled from my online portal. Earlier that morning, his brow furrowed in deep concentration. Bennett, Marcus said, tapping his gold pen against the glass desk. Did you authorize these 3 wire transfers from your joint investment account over the last 6 months? I leaned forward. Which ones? March 14th, $40,000. June 22nd, $35,000. September 10th, $50,000. All sent to an LLC registered as CNM Logistics. My blood went cold. No, I never authorized those. What is CNM Logistics? Marcus pulled up a state registry file on his laptop and turned the screen toward me. Caleb and Martha Logistics. Marcus read cleanly. Registered under Caleb Miller's name, with Lydia Harris listed as the secondary director and primary guarantor. Your wife didn't just cheat on you, Bennett. She funneled $125,000 of your personal wealth to finance your best friend's failing shipping startup. I sat in the leather chair, letting out a long, slow breath. The betrayal wasn't a sudden, heat-of-the-moment mistake. It was a systematic, calculated robbery. While I was working 60-hour weeks at my firm to build a future for us, Lydia was writing checks to her lover, feeding him seafood dinners at my table, and using my house as their playground. Marcus, I said, my voice dropping into a razor-sharp register. I don't just want a divorce. I know, Marcus smiled coldly, pulling a fresh legal pad toward him. We're filing for a complete dissolution based on marital fraud, emergency asset freeze, and a civil lawsuit for grand larceny and conversion against Caleb Miller. By the time I'm done with them, they won't even own the shirts on their backs. At 11 a.m., I drove to my company's headquarters. I was a senior director at an international asset management firm, and Caleb worked as an independent logistics broker whose biggest client was my department. For 3 years, out of loyalty to our childhood friendship, I had redirected dozens of high-value freight contracts to Caleb's agency single-handedly, keeping his business afloat. I walked straight into the executive suite and met with our managing partner, Arthur Sterling. Bennett. Arthur greeted me warmly, rising from his desk. I heard about Caleb's mother. Tragic news. Are you taking the afternoon off for the memorial? No, Arthur, I said, setting a thick leather folder on his desk. I'm here to execute a formal vendor cancellation. Arthur blinked, surprised. Cancellation? On Miller Logistics? Bennett, he's your best friend. He was, I replied smoothly. Here is the internal audit of CNM Logistics. Over the past 18 months, Caleb Miller has been double invoicing our regional shipments, inflating fuel surcharges by 22%, and kicking back unauthorized funds to a joint account held by my soon-to-be ex-wife. Arthur's smile vanished instantly. He picked up the folder, scanning the line items with practiced, lethal precision. Within 10 minutes, Arthur hit the intercom on his desk. Compliance team, execute an immediate contract termination for Miller Logistics. Freeze all pending payouts. Initiate an emergency audit and forward the findings to the district attorney's fraud unit. Arthur looked up at me, his eyes filled with professional respect and personal sympathy. Are you going to be all right, Bennett? I've never been better, I said, buttoning my suit jacket. The cancer has finally been removed. Meanwhile, across town, the memorial reception for Caleb's mother was taking place at the Grand Regency Hotel. Caleb stood in the reception hall, wearing his sharp black suit, accompanied by Lydia. Lydia was wearing a modest black dress, her eyes swollen from crying all night. After I kicked her out of the apartment, she clung to Caleb's arm like a drowning person clutching a straw, desperately hoping that Caleb's family, business, and future prospects would save her from total ruin. Aunt Martha, Caleb's aunt, was chatting with several wealthy relatives near the buffet table. Caleb is such a devoted son, Aunt Martha praised proudly. And Lydia has been a blessing. They're planning to buy a house together in the hills once the mourning period ends. Just then, Caleb's phone buzzed with an urgent notification. He pulled it out, expecting a payment confirmation from my company's accounting department. Instead, an official notice from Sterling Asset Management illuminated his screen. Notice of immediate contract termination and audit. All commercial agreements between Sterling Asset Management and C&M Logistics are revoked effective immediately due to material fraud. All bank disbursements have been frozen by court order. Caleb's face turned the color of chalk. His hands shook so hard he nearly dropped the phone. Before he could process the shock, his secondary banking app chimed with a secondary alert. Legal notice. A temporary restraining order and asset freeze has been issued by the Superior Court in the matter of Harris versus Miller and Harris. All corporate and personal accounts linked to C&M Logistics are locked pending grand larceny investigation. Caleb, Lydia whispered, noticing his pale face. What's wrong? What happened? Caleb turned his head, looking at her with a look of pure, unadulterated terror. Bennett. Caleb choked out. He canceled my contracts. He froze my bank accounts. What? Lydia gasped, her voice rising into a sharp, panicked squeak. He can't do that. That's my money too. Aunt Martha walked over, frowning. What's going on? Who froze what money? Before Caleb could cook up another lie, the double doors of the reception hall were pushed open. Two uniformed court officers, accompanied by Marcus Vance, walked into the room. Marcus walked straight up to the head table, pulling a stack of legal summonses from his briefcase. Caleb Miller? Lydia Harris? Marcus's voice echoed clearly over the quieted hall. You are officially served with a civil summons for grand larceny, marital fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. Furthermore, Mr. Miller, the district attorney's office has requested your presence for questioning regarding corporate embezzlement. Aunt Martha gasped, clutching her chest. Embezzlement. Civil summons. What is the meaning of this? Marcus offered Aunt Martha a polite, cold bow. Madam, I suggest you ask your nephew why he used your late sister's funeral as a cover to sleep with his best friend's wife, and why he stole $125,000 from the man who fed him for 3 years. The entire reception hall erupted into loud, horrified screams and gasps. Caleb's relatives stared at him with complete revulsion. Aunt Martha's face turned bright red with fury. She raised her hand and delivered a brutal, deafening slap across Caleb's face. Slap. You disgraceful worm. Aunt Martha shrieked, weeping in humiliation. Your mother isn't even in her grave, and you brought a married whore to her memorial? Lydia hid her face, weeping hysterically as the guests pointed their phones at them, filming their absolute degradation. By 3 p.m., I arrived at the vet clinic. Honey was sitting in a comfortable padded basket in the recovery room, her coat glossy, her eyes bright and green. The moment she saw me walk through the door, she let out a sweet, high-pitched mew and trotted over to rub her head against my leather shoe. She's a tough little girl, the vet smiled, handing me her carrier and medications. She just needed to be away from whatever was hurting her. We both did, I murmured, gently scooping Honey into my arms and tucking her against my chest. I took her back to my new service apartment. It was a spacious, light-filled flat on the 15th floor, featuring floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city park. I set up her cat tree by the sunny window, filled her food bowl with fresh salmon, and watched her stretch contentedly in the sunbeam. My phone rang. It was Lydia. I answered and set it on speaker while pouring myself a glass of water. Bennett. Lydia screamed into the phone, her voice completely broken, manic, and unhinged. You ruined my life. Caleb's family kicked me out of the hotel. The police are auditing my personal accounts. Where am I supposed to go? Where am I supposed to live? You can live wherever your $125,000 went. I said calmly. I didn't steal that money. Caleb told me it was a safe investment. She wept, her tone shifting from rage to pathetic, desperate begging. Bennett, please. I was tricked. Caleb manipulated me. He knew I was lonely when you were working overtime. He planned the whole thing. Lydia, I said softly, taking a sip of water. Do you remember what you said to me yesterday when you kicked Honey against the coffee table? Silence fell over the line. You said, people are much more vicious than animals could ever be. I recalled smoothly. You were right. For 3 years, I treated you like a queen. I bought you a home. I gave you my trust, and I let you into my heart. And you repaid me by throwing my cat against a table and opening your legs for a parasite. Bennett, please. I love you. She sobbed. Give me one more chance. I'll sign a post-nup. I'll work 2 jobs to pay back the money. Just don't throw me away. The divorce hearing is set for 3 weeks from today, I said, my voice as flat as a marble slab. Do not call this number again. Any further communication will be treated as harassment and forwarded to the court. I hung up and blocked her number permanently. 3 weeks passed in quiet, productive tranquility. Without the toxic drain of Lydia's demands and Caleb's subtle manipulations, my life flourished. I closed 2 major international deals at my firm, earning a promotion to senior managing director and a substantial performance bonus. I spent my evenings cooking healthy meals, reading by the window, and playing with Honey, who had transformed into a plump, radiant, incredibly affectionate cat. Meanwhile, the news from Marcus's weekly updates was a dark comedy of poetic justice. Without my business backing, C&M Logistics went into immediate bankruptcy. Caleb's company vehicles were repossessed, his office lease was terminated, and he was formally charged with 3 counts of grand larceny and corporate fraud, facing up to 7 years in state prison. Lydia was named as a co-conspirator. Her parents, modest, honest people who lived in a small town upstate, were so humiliated by the public scandal that they refused to pay her legal fees or let her return home. To pay for a basic defense attorney, Lydia was forced to sell her luxury jewelry, her designer bags, and her personal car at a fraction of their value. She moved into a tiny, damp basement apartment near the industrial district, working a minimum wage shift at a local diner. Without money, without status, and without a common enemy to unite them, Lydia and Caleb's passionate romance devolved into a brutal, violent nightmare. They blamed each other for everything. Lydia accused Caleb of ruining her marriage and stealing her youth. Caleb accused Lydia of being a gold-digging whore who destroyed his business and put him in handcuffs. 2 days before the final divorce hearing, they got into a screaming match. Outside the diner where Lydia worked, Caleb shoved her into a pile of trash cans. Lydia slashed his car tires with a box cutter. Both ended up spending the night in the precinct holding cell. The final divorce hearing took place on a bright, crisp Tuesday morning at the Municipal Family Court. I walked into the courtroom wearing a tailored dark gray suit, accompanied by Marcus Vance. I looked healthy, sharp, and rested. Lydia sat at the defense table. She looked unrecognizable. She had lost at least 15 pounds in 3 weeks. Her hair was dry and unwashed, her face pale and gaunt, wearing an ill-fitting, wrinkled blazer she had clearly bought from a thrift store. When she saw me walk in, her eyes lit up with a wild, desperate flame, but as she took in my immaculate suit, my calm composure, and the total absence of pain in my eyes, that flame flickered and died. She realized, with absolute certainty, that I had moved on completely. The judge presided over the session with cold efficiency. Given the overwhelming digital evidence of marital infidelity, financial conversion, and physical property damage, the ruling was swift and absolute. 1. The marriage of Bennett Harris and Lydia Harris was formally dissolved. 2. The apartment and all premarital assets remained 100% under Bennett Harris's ownership. 3. Lydia Harris was ordered to pay restitution of $125,000 to Bennett Harris, alongside a $40,000 civil penalty for marital fraud. 4. All claims for spousal support filed by Lydia Harris were denied with prejudice. Gavel strike. Court is adjourned, the judge declared. Marcus shook my hand warmly. Congratulations, Bennett. Clean sweep. Thank you, Marcus. I smiled, gathering my briefcase. As I turned to leave the courtroom, Lydia stumbled out from behind her defense desk, running toward me, her voice hoarse and broken. Bennett. Wait. Please. Marcus stepped in front of her, but I held up a hand, letting her approach 3 feet away. She looked at me, tears streaming down her hollow cheeks, her hands shaking violently. Bennett. She choked out, her voice raspy. You got everything back. Your money, your house, your freedom. Do you really have to ruin me completely? I have nothing left. I'm living in a basement. I'm working 12 hours a day. I looked down at her. I didn't feel hatred. I didn't feel pleasure in her suffering. I felt nothing more than the mild indifference one feels toward a stranger sitting on a park bench. Lydia, I said quietly, my voice smooth and resonant. You had a husband who loved you, a beautiful home, a peaceful life, and a cat that loved you. You threw it all in the trash for a leech who didn't even care if you were breathing. She sobbed, clutching her face in her hands. You didn't get ruined by me, I continued softly. You got ruined by your own choices. Enjoy your basement. I turned my back on her and walked through the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom, stepping out into the bright, warm afternoon sunlight. My car was waiting at the curb. I opened the passenger door, and Honey, who was sitting comfortably in her travel basket, looked up at me and let out a soft, happy purr. I smiled, stepped into the driver's seat, and drove out into the open, boundless road ahead.